Hello, dear listeners. Today we will talk about how to learn English, even without a teacher. We will show how to learn step by step on your own. I will give many examples and we will talk about methods that really work. This way, everyone can learn English better and with more confidence.
That sounds great. I think many people learn English alone, but do not know where to begin. And I feel the same.
That is normal. Sometimes it is hard to learn a language without a teacher.
Why did you choose this topic for today?
Because many people have this exact problem. Not everyone has an English course or a teacher. Some people live in places without an English school. Others have no time for a course. And some just prefer to study on their own. But if you know how to learn well, you can make great progress without a teacher.
That is true. I remember my first months with English when I had no teacher and only watched videos online.
Oh, please tell us more. Our listeners surely know this situation too.
At the start, I was often confused. I heard many new words, but I did not know if I was learning right. Sometimes I also used too many apps. In the end, I did not know what I should use to study.
Yes, that is a very typical problem.
I learned a lot, but I had no clear plan.
That is exactly why we talk about this today. Many people study very hard but without structure.
And then you get frustrated quickly.
Right, and the good news is you can learn English without a teacher. You only need the right methods.
That sounds motivating.
Our goal today is to show you how to study alone and still make progress.
So, practical tips for self-learning.
Exactly. I can also share a bit from my experience as a teacher.
You have already seen many English learners.
Yes, and I keep seeing the same problems.
Which ones, for example?
Some people only study grammar, others use 5 different apps at the same time, and many stop again after a short period.
That sounds really familiar.
So, today we will look at a few simple principles.
Peter, I have a question. Many of our listeners learn English on their own. But how can someone truly learn without a teacher?
That is a very good question, Penelope, and to be honest, it is one of the most important questions in language learning.
I think many people think of grammar first.
Exactly, and that is where the first problem starts.
Really?
Yes, many people believe that learning a language means learning grammar rules. They buy a grammar book, study tables, and try to understand everything perfectly.
I did that at the start as well.
And how did it work?
Honestly, not very well. I learned many rules, but I still could not speak properly.
I see exactly that very often as a teacher. People study a lot of grammar, but they still feel unsure.
Why is that?
Because language is much more than grammar. Grammar is only one part of the language.
What else is part of it?
Language is above all communication. It is about understanding things and expressing them. It is about everyday situations.
So, for example, conversations at work or in the supermarket.
Exactly, when you learn English, you should not only look at rules, you should also experience the language. And that is why language learning is actually something very beautiful. Many people see a new language first only as work. They think of grammar, exercises, and tests. But a language is much more than that. A language is a tool to speak with other people and to understand other cultures. It also gives you new views.
That sounds much nicer than only learning grammar.
Exactly. When you learn English, A new world opens. You can suddenly understand people you did not understand before. You can have conversations, make new friends, and enjoy films and books in another language.
That is true. I still remember the moment when I first really understood a conversation in English.
That is a great feeling, right?
Yes, I was really proud.
And exactly that feeling is very important when learning. Many people focus only on mistakes or on things they still cannot do, but they forget how many small steps they have already made.
That is a good point.
That is why I often tell my students, always think of your goal. Why are you learning English? Maybe you want to work in the UK. Maybe you want to travel or meet new people.
Or maybe you already live in the UK and want to integrate better.
Exactly. Language is the key to other people. If you can speak English, you can have talks, understand jokes, and become part of daily life.
That makes the language feel more alive.
Absolutely. English is then no longer only a school subject or a task, it becomes a part of your life.
And then learning probably feels easier too.
Exactly. When you keep your goal in mind, you get more motivation automatically. Then you do not study only for an exam, but for real talks and real meetings with people.
Now I am really interested in why our viewers learn English.
Before we go on, I have a question that really interests me. I would like to know why our listeners actually learn English. Every person has a different motivation.
That is true. Some learn English for work, others for study.
Exactly. Some maybe already live in the UK and want to communicate better in daily life. Others learn English simply because they enjoy languages or find the culture interesting.
Yes, the reasons can be very different.
That is why I would like to involve our listeners for a moment. If you are listening now, please write in the comments. Why are you learning English?
We would really like to know.
Do you learn English for your career, or maybe for studies in the UK, or simply out of interest?
And maybe you can also tell us how long you have been learning English.
Penelope, why did you actually start learning English?
My first reason was my university course. I wanted to study in the UK, so I had to learn English.
That is a very good reason.
At the start, it was honestly not easy. Many lectures were in English, and I first had to get used to them.
I can imagine that.
But with time, it got better and better. And now I want to improve my English even more. I would like to work in the UK later.
That is a lovely goal.
Yes, and English helps me to talk with people, make new contacts, and feel safer in daily life.
That is exactly what a language is about.
And that is why we would really like to hear your stories too.
So please write us in the comments why you learn English.
And also tell us how you like this podcast.
If this episode helps you, feel free to like or subscribe.
That helps us a lot and motivates us to make more episodes.
And now we continue with our topic, how to learn English, even without a teacher.
Peter, I want to return to something you just said. You said we should bring English into daily life. But I ask myself, how can we do that exactly? Many people hear this advice, but do not know what to do.
That is a very good question. We just said that English should be more than grammar and exercises. If you want to learn without a teacher, the language must become part of daily life. Now we can look very concretely at how to do that.
Yes, that interests me too. Many people have no course and no teacher. They may sit alone at home and do not know how to practice.
I see that very often with my students. Many people first think they need a teacher or a course, but you can learn a lot alone. Some of my students reached a good level before their first class.
That surprises me a little.
Yes, but it is really possible. The most important step is to start thinking in English. This may sound strange at first, but it is very effective.
Thinking in English. People often hear that, but I do not know how to start.
At the start, it is very easy. You do not need to think complex sentences at once. You can begin with very small things. When you walk through town or look out the window, start to name things in English.
So, for example, the things I see.
Exactly. Imagine you look up and see the sky. Then in your mind say, the sky, or the sky is blue.
That is really easy.
Yes, and these simple things are very important. If you see a street, say, this is a street. If you see a tree, think, this is a tree.
That reminds me a bit of children.
That is a very good comparison. Children learn language exactly this way.
And adults can do just the same.
Exactly. You can do small exercises everywhere. When you walk through your flat, say, this is my table, then this is my chair, and this is my window.
I have actually tried that once.
And how was it?
At first it felt a bit strange, but after a few minutes it was even fun.
I hear that often. At the start it feels odd, but after a while it becomes normal.
And one day you think automatically in English.
Exactly. At first there are only single words, then short sentences follow.
For example,
For instance, the sky is beautiful. Or, that is a big house. Or, today the weather is good.
that already sounds much more natural.
Yes, and that is exactly the point. Language grows through repetition and contact with reality.
I think many people fear they know too few words.
That is true, but you do not need many words to start. Even with a small vocabulary, you can practice a lot.
So better start, even if you do not know everything yet.
Exactly. Perfection is not important at the start. The key is to let your brain get used to the language.
I also notice that I sometimes think about my day in English.
That is a very good sign.
For example, I sometimes think, I need to work now, or I'm making a coffee.
Perfect. Those are exactly the situations that help with learning.
But sometimes I mix English and my mother tongue.
That is completely normal. Many people do that at the start. Your brain works in two languages at the same time.
That calms me a bit.
With time, English becomes stronger. The more you listen and speak, the more natural it feels.
Can you use this method outside as well?
Definitely. When you're out, you can describe many things. You can say, I see a car. Or, this is a park. Or, that is a big building.
That sounds almost like a little game.
Exactly, and you can play this game everywhere. On the bus, in the park, on the way to work.
I think many people make learning too complicated.
That is true. Many look for the perfect app or the perfect method.
But often the simple things are best.
Exactly. If you use English a bit every day, your brain slowly builds a feeling for the language.
Peter, now I want to be even more concrete. Many people hear such general tips, yet they still ask, what should I really do each day? So I have a question. What are your top 5 tips for learning English at home?
That is a very good question. There are many methods, but some work especially well. My first tip is really simple. Write a small diary in English.
A diary? That sounds interesting. But what exactly should one write there?
You can simply write about your day. For example, what did you do today? What happened? Whom did you meet? The texts do not need to be long. 3 or 4 sentences are enough at the start.
That sounds doable. But why is a diary so helpful?
A diary has several advantages. First, you practice writing regularly. Second, you automatically talk about your own life. And third, you learn to use the past in a natural way.
Ah, because you write about things that already happened.
Exactly. You can write, for example, today I went to work, or I drank a coffee, or I met a friend.
Those are very typical sentences from daily life.
Exactly. And that is why they are perfect for practice. You learn not only new words, but also how to speak about your own day.
I think many people are afraid to write because they think their English is not good enough.
I hear that very often. But a diary is not about perfect grammar. It is about expressing your thoughts in English.
So just start and do not overthink.
Exactly. If you write a few sentences each day, you will see progress very quickly.
That sounds like a really good exercise.
Best of all, later you can read your old texts and see how much better your English is. You know what, Penelope? I have a small idea. I actually brought my diary from yesterday.
Really? That is perfect for our topic.
Exactly. And I have a little challenge for our listeners. Dear listeners, I will now read a short entry from my diary. Listen closely and try to understand what I did yesterday. Let us see how much you understand.
That is a good exercise.
So, I will read now. Yesterday was a rather quiet day. In the morning I got up at 7 o'clock. After that I made myself a coffee and prepared a small breakfast. I ate 2 slices of toast with cheese and drank a cup of coffee. Then I read a bit and answered my emails. Later I went for a walk because the weather was very nice. The sun was shining and the sky was blue. In the afternoon I worked for a few hours and prepared a new podcast. In the evening I phoned a friend and we talked about our plans for the weekend. After that I watched a film and went to bed about 11 o'clock.
Peter, I must say honestly, I understood most of the text. But a few words were still hard for me.
That is completely normal. When you learn a language, you often understand most, but some words are still missing.
For example, you said that you prepared a small breakfast. What exactly does prepare mean?
Prepare means that you make or organize something before you use it. In this case, I made my breakfast. I took the bread, added cheese, and made my coffee.
Ah, so just get everything ready.
Exactly. Another example is, I prepared dinner. Then you cook or set the food ready.
That already helps me a lot. And you also said that you prepared a podcast.
Right, that means that I worked on a new podcast. I maybe wrote texts, collected ideas, and organized everything.
I see. And there is one more word I have not fully understood. You said you talked about plans for the weekend.
Good question. Plans simply means things you want to do in the future.
So, for example, at the weekend, I want to meet my friends.
Exactly. That is your plan for the weekend.
I think many listeners know this feeling. You understand the text, but a few words are still missing.
Yes, that is a normal part of learning. That is why it is so important to hear or read such texts often.
Peter, I really like the diary idea. But I also feel something else is missing. I don't only want to write, I want to listen and understand more. Sometimes I know the words, yet when people speak fast, I understand far less.
That is a very typical problem. Many learners know many words, but they have heard too little real English. So my second tip is very important. Watch films or series in English. Films are a fantastic way to learn a language.
I have tried that too. But honestly, I was sometimes frustrated. People speak quickly. They use slang. And sometimes I catch only a few words.
That is completely normal. At the start, almost all learners understand only small parts of a film. So I always suggest a simple strategy. Watch a film you already know.
Do you mean a film I have watched before?
Exactly. Maybe you have a favorite childhood film or a movie you have watched 5 times. When you know the story, you do not need to focus on the plot. Then your brain can focus more on the language.
That makes sense. If I already know what happens, I can listen better.
Right, one more thing is important. Many people watch a film once and then move to the next. Often that is not the best method.
You mean I should watch the same film more often?
Exactly. Repetition is incredibly important in language learning. If you watch the same film many times, you hear the same sentences again and again.
That sounds a bit boring.
Maybe at the start, but I promise you it is very effective. I used this method myself when I learned a new language.
Really?
Yes, I had a film that I really liked back then, and I watched it again and again.
How many times?
Sometimes it is enough to see a film 2 or 3 times. Even that makes a big difference. The first time you may catch only a few words. The second time you suddenly notice whole sentences. And the third time you often see that you understand much more.
That actually sounds very logical.
Yes, and in that moment you feel the progress. Suddenly you hear a sentence and think, wait, I have heard that before. And this time you understand it.
That must be a great feeling.
Absolutely. These small moments are incredibly motivating. They show you that your brain is slowly processing and storing the language. Tell me, Penelope, have you ever done that? I mean, watched one film several times to understand the language better.
To be honest, not so often with films. I sometimes lose patience when I see the same movie again and again. But I do something similar with podcasts and audiobooks.
Really? Tell me more.
I like to listen to podcasts in English, especially when they tell interesting stories. Sometimes I listen to one episode 2 or 3 times. The first time I maybe catch only the main idea. The second time, I focus more on single words and sentences.
That is a very good method.
Yes, and it is similar with audiobooks. If I enjoy a story, I often listen again. Then I can really dive into the story.
That is even a big advantage.
How do you mean?
When you dive into a story, you often forget that you are learning a language. You focus on the plot and the characters.
That is exactly what happens to me.
In that moment, your brain learns especially well. You hear the language, understand the context, and link the words with emotions and pictures.
That explains why I can remember some sentences from audiobooks so well.
Exactly. Stories have great power in learning. They help us store words and structures in a natural way.
So it does not really matter whether we use films, series, podcasts, or audiobooks.
Right. The most important thing is that you hear real English often and choose content that truly interests you.
Then you stay motivated for longer.
Absolutely. Curiosity and interest are incredibly important in language learning. Another tip I give often is reading books. Many people forget how helpful reading is when you learn a language.
Books in English?
Exactly. At the start, choose simple books or short stories. When you read, you meet many words and sentence patterns again and again. That helps your brain get used to the language.
But sometimes books have many new words. Then I lose track quickly.
That happens to many learners. So I always share a small strategy. If you see a new word that seems important, write it down.
So, not every word.
Exactly. You do not need to write every unknown word. Choose only words you like or words you see often.
And then I just write them in a notebook.
You can do that, but I suggest something else. Write the words on a small card.
A card?
Yes, a small card you always carry with you. Maybe 5 or 10 new words. Then you can look at them during the day.
That is a good idea.
Imagine you wait for the bus or stand in a queue. Many people then look at their phone.
That is true. I do that too.
Instead, you can look at your small card and repeat your new words.
That is actually a very easy exercise.
Exactly. And these small moments in daily life are perfect for learning.
I actually do something similar.
Really?
Yes, I sometimes write new words in my phone. When I have a short moment, I open my notes and read them.
That is also a very good method.
Especially when I am out, I have my phone with me anyway.
Exactly. It is not important whether you use a card or your phone. Important is that you see the words often.
Then they stay better in the head.
Exactly. Repetition is one of the most important keys in learning.
I also notice that I suddenly recognize some words in daily life.
That is a great feeling, right?
Yes, suddenly you read a word and think, wait, I know that.
Exactly. In that moment, you notice that your vocabulary grows.
That is really motivating.
Absolutely. So books and small word lists are a very strong combination when learning English. And now comes what I think is the last and maybe the most important tip for learning English. You must have the courage to speak.
I think that is the hardest part for many people.
Yes, I see that as a teacher very often. Many people study words and grammar for a long time. They read books, listen to podcasts, and watch films. But when they have to speak, they become very nervous.
I know that too. You are afraid to make mistakes.
Exactly. This fear is very common. Many think, if I make a mistake, other people will laugh or think my English is bad.
Yes, I sometimes think exactly that.
But the truth is very different. Most people are happy when someone learns their language.
Really?
Absolutely. When someone tries to speak English, most people see the courage and effort. They do not care about every small mistake.
That calms me a bit.
And as a teacher, I can often see very early who will speak well later.
Really? How can you see that?
Not by the grammar, not by how many words someone knows. I see it in whether someone is ready to speak.
So, just start talking.
Exactly. The students who open their mouth, ask questions and try to speak often make the biggest progress.
Even if they make many mistakes.
Especially then. Mistakes are an important part of learning. Every mistake shows that your brain is working.
I think many people want to speak perfectly first.
Yes, that is a big problem. Perfectionism can stop learning a language.
You maybe wait too long until you feel ready.
Exactly. But the right moment often never comes. You just have to start.
I remember my first talks in English. I was very nervous.
And how was it in the end?
Honestly, much better than I thought. The people were very friendly and patient.
I hear that again and again from my students.
And after each talk, you feel a bit safer.
Right, speaking is like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
That is a nice picture.
That is why I always say, open your mouth and try to speak.
Even if at first you only use simple sentences.
Exactly. Even a simple sentence like, hello, how are you, is an important step.
And one day, the sentences will get longer.
Exactly. Step by step, your confidence grows. Well, Penelope, we have reached the end of today's episode. Today we spoke about how to learn English even without a teacher. We saw that there are many options. You can write a diary and watch films or series in English. You can listen to podcasts or audiobooks and also read books. And it is very important to repeat new words in daily life and bring English into your world.
Exactly. I think the most important point was the courage to speak and not to fear mistakes.
Absolutely, mistakes are part of learning. No one speaks a new language perfectly from the start. But if you practice often and use the language actively, you will feel safer step by step.
I especially liked that many of these tips are very simple. You can test them right in daily life.
Exactly. You do not need complicated methods. Small habits can make a big difference.
And now we are, of course, curious about you.
Dear listeners, please write in the comments which topics interest you for our next episodes.
Maybe you want to hear more about daily conversations.
Or about typical mistakes when learning English.
Maybe also about work, travel, or life in the UK.
We will read your ideas with pleasure and use them for new podcast episodes.
And if you like our podcast, you can, of course, like or subscribe.
That helps us a lot and motivates us to create new content.
Thank you very much for listening again today.
We are very happy if you join us next time.
Until the next episode, and good luck with your English learning.
Goodbye.